Hey guys, Bix, we're road2root.com. I have the loveliest man out there in silver, Andy Schectman,
Love you,
who's
buddy.
he took 5 minutes off the assembly line putting together boxes of silver to send out to people to chat with us about what's going on in the silver market. Andy, first question, how's life in your realm?
Well, first of all, Bixie, no matter how busy I am, I always have time for you. Since Silicon Valley Bank failed, this whole industry has just been in a tailspin. I mean, it's been a whirlwind. Pick your adjective. We've added north of 12,500 clients in the last 30 days. People are really freaking out, I guess you could say. And during Silver Squeeze, you had a whole new group of people, investors that wanted to capitalize on making a profit. That's the way I looked at it. They were coming in on the heels of GameStop and AMC, and let's squeeze the commercial banks. Let's squeeze the silver market, just like we did these guys. It's a bigger ticket. We can do it. We can do it. We can make a profit. This is different. This is about people realizing that, it's one thing to talk about your stock portfolio, your bond portfolio, your real estate portfolio being on thin ice. It's another thing altogether to say that the banks in which you have left your money and trusted for a very long time are no longer safe. And what are the ramifications of that? And the difference is the mentality that people have. They say we're motivated on one hand by greed and the other hand by fear being a much stronger motivator. I'll tell you, I've never experienced anything quite like it. I thought Silver Squeeze would never be repeated. Is Silver Squeeze on steroids because, people are terrified that they're going to wake up one morning to find what Janet Yellen said, and that is that if the bank fails and it's not systemic enough, well, they're going to be bailed in and they're going to be left to fail. And so this is why you're seeing all the money yanked out of the regional banks. The commercial real estate is in shambles. There's going to be more, and people are freaking out. So it's either put your money into gold, short-term treasuries, or into a money market and one of the big commercial banks. And when you realize the reverse repo market, which is a mirror image of the money market, if you look at the two graphs on the St. Louis Fed, they're identical, and they're only almost 99% of the money in the reverse repo market is coming from the money markets. And they're paying a higher rate of return at the Fed than the banks are paying in CDs. So all this money is leaving, and a good portion of it's coming into this industry, Bix, and it's chaotic to say the least.
Well, we knew it would come. We didn't know how it would come. I've been focusing on the conspiracy side of this game for 20 years. Um, but you were mainly mainstream for a long time, along with as well you should be. That was your industry. You're like, hey, um, and you've come down the conspiracy road with me a few times, but I want to go down the mainstream road with you because you don't even need to believe that silver's rigged to know that the world is running out of silver. Could you talk a little about that and especially the Belt and Road Initiative and all that stuff going on around the world, regardless, if that's a word, regardless of the what's going on with the conspiracy of manipulation? What's going on in the real world?
Yeah, and I don't think that metals manipulation is a conspiracy any longer. There are other conspiracies out there, of course, but to me, that is and should be acknowledged for mainstream. And whether it be the fee or penalty that was paid by J.P. Morgan or the admission by Bart Chilton on Chris Marcus's and Andrew Maguire's podcast, both of them, I mean, you're talking, it's been legitimized. So don't beat yourself up over that, Bix. To me, that's as white bread as it gets. It's real. But as far as the bigger picture, and in particular the Belt Road and the BRICS nations, for 3 years I've been following a path that has led me to believe that we are on the heels or the cusp rather of losing potentially the singular world reserve status, losing the petrodollar. And, I ask a lot of people all the time, Bix, what makes the dollar the world reserve currency? And so few people really know. And, of course, it was backed by gold for other governments after World War II at Bretton Woods. And so other governments could always exchange their dollars for gold at a fixed rate of 35 bucks an ounce. That made the dollar as good as gold until the end of Vietnam, when there were governments, in particular, de Gaulle from France, realizing that we were creating more dollars to fund the Vietnam War than we had gold backing it. So he made the decision to send warships to New York Harbor filled with dollars and demanded gold, and he got it. And Nixon was within hours of having all the gold bled out of the Treasury, and he went back on his promise, closed the gold window. And it was a few years later that the deal was struck with the Saudi Kingdom in 1974, to where we'll protect you, we've got your back, no one will ever mess with you, but for that, you will value oil globally in dollars. And it's been that way for 50 years. And every country on the planet has had to own dollars in order to buy oil for 50 years. And it's created a synthetic demand. Now, there are things that have happened leading up to this, where we are today, in particular, starting in 2017 and moving all the way forward, that got me on the trail of this. And it started with the banks repatriating all of their gold, the central banks, and Germany in particular, repatriating all their gold from the New York Fed and the Bank of England. And this was in 2017, when it just didn't make sense to me that the banks would be doing this, because gold had been going down for 6 years. And then the banks, these banks, so the Bank of Germany was the biggest one, the Bundesbank, but within a few weeks of that happening, the Bank of Austria, Turkey, Poland, the Czech National Bank, the Dutch National Bank, all of these Eastern European banks did the same thing. Give us back our gold, they said to the Bank of England and to the New York Fed. And don't worry, I'll get to silver in a moment. But anyway, so this was an unusual trend. The following year, those banks bought more gold as a group than they did in the previous 60 years combined. And they're going on a gold accumulation spree when in April of 2019, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, reclassified gold as the world's only other tier one asset, next to US dollars and treasuries. And that really opened up my eyes. So I'm saying, boy, the BIS must have been, cluing in their buddies, because they went from in the middle of a 6-year bear market to overt repatriation and massive accumulation, and then they reclassified. This is when things really started to heat up for me. In 2020, I noticed the Belt Road Initiative. Now, this had started a few years earlier, but had really started to gain steam in 2020. And this is the largest infrastructure project ever attempted in human history. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 plus countries on it, including all of the 14 OPEC countries, which is a big deal to me. All of them are on the Belt Road, even the ones in South America. And so it is basically the old Silk Road. It is China's attempt to industrialize and connect through maritime channels, bridges, roads, railways, all of these things, Asia, Africa, South America, and parts of Europe. And it's important to note that this is similar, I guess you could call it, to the Panama Canal, but on steroids in terms of what its real uses are for. It will only be patrolled by military and transportation of commerce. So this is a way to really industrialize and bring goods to this entire Eurasian continent, including South America, where you are seeing China come into these countries and build ports, bridges, railways, oil rigs, oil refineries, gold and silver mines, and the ability to pull this stuff out of the ground and then bring it to market. And when you look at the Belt Road, talking about silver, you're talking north of 65, 70% of human population, and more and more and more countries keep joining on, making that bigger. But a lot of it is unindustrialized. And so in order to industrialize, you don't just build bridges and roads, you also have to connect things digitally. The need for silver is extraordinary in this project, which has greater ramifications than just what it seems like. And I really started to pay attention to what was going on as this started to formulate. And, when you look at what happened the following year, and I'm leaving some stuff out so in the sake of speed here, but when you look at what happened in 2021, the game started to really, really, really change as it pertains to the reserve standard, as it pertains to this big picture. And that was the day we left Afghanistan in an embarrassing way. And, if you grew up when you and I did, Bix, you knew you never left anyone behind. That was the mantra of the military: never leave anyone behind. Well, we left 2,000 Americans in Afghanistan behind enemy lines, and thousands of freedom fighters who gave their lives and everything for the American cause, which was an embarrassing time. And they're still there. There are a lot of them that are still there trying to get out unsuccessfully. And the day we left, the following day, Saudi Arabia announced a joint military cooperation agreement with Russia. This was a big deal. I started screaming the petrodollar's dead right here, because it is the protection of the Saudi kingdom and by extension OPEC that gives us the reserve standard. And when they signed this agreement with Russia, and then the following day Russia did it with Nigeria, it became very obvious to me where we are heading. The day after that, Russia announced that all of their nuclear submarines were outfitted with hypersonic ICBMs that travel in a plasma cloud and go Mach 9 up in the stratosphere. They can't be really hit by any conventional means of protection and hit the ground at speed of an asteroid. That was their way of saying, don't think of doing to us what you did to Hussein and Gaddafi. So things really are starting to speed up at this point, and it's becoming very obvious to me what is happening. And, you know, when you look at the Belt Road Initiative, when you look at the BRICS countries, which I'll get to in a moment, you're beginning to see a massive swell of humanity. So subsequently from that, Saudi Arabia has formally applied to BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa, amongst 65 other countries that have already signed up or are in the process of, including our neighbors to the south, Mexico, Egypt, Turkey, who bought more gold than anyone in the world for the last year and a half by a long shot. All of these countries are accumulating assets because we were told that their new system will be pegged to commodities. Now, I think they will use distributed ledger, blockchain. They will use probably the rails of the digital yuan, which has been successfully transacting things, including almost all of the settlement on the Belt Road for 4 years, to the tune of north of $30 billion in transactions. That's just my own belief. But anyways, so Saudi Arabia joins BRICS, and then they tell the folks at Davos that they are interested in listening to selling oil in other currencies. They just formally applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which in and of itself represents close to 60% of human population. It is a military organization as well, maybe the largest in the world. So you put together being protected by Russia, being protected by now, by extension, by China, part of the BRICS, on the Belt Road with all of the other OPEC producing countries, you can start to see things are starting to move faster and faster and faster. And all of the deals that are being set up, including our allies like France, where Macron just signed a 51-point agreement with China, ranging, as they say, from 5G to military engagement. The rumors are that Japan, Australia, New Zealand are also considering joining BRICS, and our allies are walking out the back door, which is very concerning. So all of this relates to silver in a very important way, because when I think of the value of gold and silver, I think of them sitting on the ledge of a bathtub. And it's not gold and silver that have gone up over all of these years. It's the dollar in which we measure them against, the water slowly draining from the tub. You pull the plug on the tub and bang, gold and silver appear to have gone to the moon, but really what has happened is that the dollar has gotten clubbed, and now you're looking up at the gold and silver from the bottom of the bathtub. So how does this all play out? Well, it plays out, in my opinion, when we lose the reserve status. Why would we lose the reserve status? Well, we've weaponized the dollar. We've talked about that. And we kicked Russia out of SWIFT, incentivizing all of these countries to speed up their formation of alliances. Even Macron talked about this in his visit to Xi Jinping 2 weeks ago, where he said it's not just the countries that are pissed off about this, it's the banks and the corporations who are being sanctioned by the West for doing business with countries that are on the do not do business with list. There was a French bank fined $4 billion for trading with Iran. It's pissing people off and pushing them away from the dollar. Part of me believes this was intended because of our nearly $200 trillion worth of debt that can never be paid off. But how does it all play out? How does it end? It ends if and when Saudi Arabia and the rest of OPEC, who are all on the Belt Road, standing arm in arm, who have already told us they're open to taking other currencies. They have joined BRICS. They have joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You put those two organizations next to the Belt Road, you're talking 80% of the world. Who's not going green? We are. What do they need us for? We're destroying the value of the dollar. We're blowing up the treasury market. So whatever they're exchanging their valuable oil for is shit. And instead, they're joining their friends and allies that are formulating a new alliance that, according to Zoltan Pozar, and I believe it will be a new Bretton Woods 3, he calls it. Bretton Woods 1 being at the end of World War II, where the dollar was backed by gold, and informal Bretton Woods 2 would have been at the end of the dollar standard when Nixon closed the gold window, and then it became the petrodollar. Bretton Woods 3 will be a system dominated by transparency and commodities. Now, you look at all of these countries. What is China doing? They're building infrastructure, including oil refineries, all the hell over the place. Oil is not going away with this group. That represents north of 80% of human population. You put them together, and all these OPEC producing countries are being protected by Russia and China and all of the BRICS nations. Their GDP and their military might is better than ours. And so when the pieces are in place, you could see them saying, thanks for the memories, guys. We've decided to open up oil purchases in the new BRICS currency that will be pegged to commodities, or the new Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a currency that is being rumored to be backed by gold, the only other tier one asset, or whatever it is, rupee or ruble. Even if it were yuan, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, it is leaving this system. And when that happens, the dollar collapses because everyone on the planet has had to own them to buy oil. And there's way more of them outside the US. And when those dollars dump, come flooding home, interest rates have to go parabolic, because if they don't, to compensate for that massive inflation, it becomes Weimar Republic. How can you have 5% interest with 30% inflation? People will just throw the money away, use it for kindling. So how does that affect gold and silver? It affects it massively. And this is why I believe you've seen the smartest money in the world drain the exchanges in front of what is coming. They know what's coming, just like the Eastern European central banks knew gold was going to be reclassified tier one and went on a massive spree of accumulation and repatriation. They were front running what was coming. They are front running what is coming now. They know this moment is inevitable. And there are very few assets on this planet that will protect you when the dollar collapses, because everything that makes people feel wealthy in this country is inversely correlated to a rise in interest rates. And that is what I really do believe is coming. Silver, to me, is the most undervalued asset on the planet. It is the opportunity of a generation. And when you see a country like India import 304 million ounces last year, which is 20 million ounces more than is on the entire COMEX market, which is almost 9 times the amount in the registered category right now on COMEX, that being the category where the bars are backing the contracts issued. It's game over if you're not already in gold and silver. So when you look at this from a macro perspective, Bix, gold and silver are not an investment. What they are is wealth that has outlived everything the world's ever thrown at it. And this might be the biggest thing the world has ever thrown at the US dollar, that's for sure. And kind of like the game of Jenga, where you pull one piece out at a time before the tower tips over. You look at what Kenya said 2 weeks ago, that they're going to sell their oil to UAE and to Saudi Arabia, or buy oil rather from them in Kenyan shillings. And then the president of Kenya says, those of you holding dollars in this country, do what you have to do or you will experience losses, because in a few weeks this market will be different. Okay, whatever. In normal times, whatever. But in the game of Jenga, it's another piece and another piece and another piece. And finally, that whole thing topples over. This is why it has never been so important ever to hold gold and silver. And now, just to touch a tad bit on the conspiracy side, and I'll let you then chime in. This is why they're holding the price of gold and silver down. They're doing it so they can accumulate it. And I just want to make one mention, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. Now, I didn't ask them on silver. I should have. But this is how they do it. I asked my head trader, how much does it cost for us to buy a 100-ounce COMEX gold contract? Because we hedge our inventory with the contract. He says $7,000 in our margin account. That's it. Trade's just a few bucks. So if I'm a commercial bank or a central bank with 500 million in my margin account, the leverage is 15 times. That means 500 million, I am controlling what? Or 30 times leverage. I'm controlling $15 billion in gold or silver derivatives where I can suppress the price, which, like what we saw this morning, reach deep into my pocket, gobble everything up physical when no one's looking because everyone's too bummed out about the price, and then paper over the shorts with more money. Now, when the game ends in several ways, but one is which people say, I don't want your paper anymore. I'm standing for delivery. We've seen that, and that's coming. But I really do believe that these trends are accelerating, and the biggest money in the world sees it. And whether it's on that side of the table, moving away from the dollar, accumulating assets and formulating alliances like Iran and Saudi Arabia, Sunni and Shiite, who hate each other for centuries, are now building embassies in each other's countries. A peace deal brokered by the Chinese because my enemy's enemy is my friend. These pieces, Jenga, 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 they're all being put into place or pulled out from the dollar hegemony. And whether it ends by that happening, where they say thanks for the memories on a Monday morning and bang, they all dump dollars and it's Armageddon, or it just ends by the constant removal of product from the LBMA and the COMEX, and there is just some sort of force majeure or the inability to take delivery anymore. Things are going to happen, and we're going to wake up and find silver not only impossible to get, but incredibly expensive. And I think too many people focus on just what's happening inside the US, and what's happening outside the US, to me, has been the key to everything that is coming for the last 3 years. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions from you.
That's just, it's so perfect what you describe. And you describe both sides of the silver equation, the industrial side and the monetary side. As a matter of fact, this monster,
oh my gosh,
was just released by the Silver Institute. It's the annual silver survey. You, like me, I'm not a fan of these guys. I think they're hokey and they're just adding to what they had the year before. They can't explain, why India imported 300 million ounces of silver last year. It's not in this data. They put a little bit in silverware and a little bit in jewelry, but that's it. But what strikes me as amazing is what you just described is things going on outside of the Western world for the most part. And what you described on the industrial side is more than half of the people out there who are not living the life we are wanting to get there, wanting to industrialize that entire area that the Road and Belt Initiative is covering. Here's the problem, and it's a massive problem. We are already in a silver deficit. This is the fourth year of the silver deficit. As a matter of fact, the supply-demand difference, according to the silver survey, was 238 million ounces last year. 238 million ounces that came from the middle of nowhere. It's a plug number for them. But this is the fourth year. There is no way to overlay what you just explained is happening on top of the current situation with silver, where the Western world is running out, has been running out for quite a while, and uses tricks and gimmicks to hide it from the people. You hear very little about silver. The saddest thing is, people like entities like the Silver Institute are like the gold standard for silver analysis. When it's like, oh my God, what are you talking about? These guys are horrible. And I know a lot of people who look at they like looking at the graph. They do an annual chart because it gives them at least some reference, because silver's really not reported very much. It very rarely is mined as primary metal. It's always a add-on metal of a zinc mine or a copper mine or anything that, we got some silver. A lot of times they just take it out of or take it out of their costs associated with pulling all the zinc out or the copper out or whatever they're mining for. They see silver as a byproduct, which is the craziest thing in the world to me, because it's the most important metal on the planet. It's the best conductor of electricity. The thermal dynamic components are unbelievable. It beats everything in every category. My question would be, how can the Belt and Road Initiative even continue? Or the investment initiatives even continue in a world where the West is already maxed out in silver availability.
Well,
Where
maybe this is why India has imported 300 million ounces. Maybe this is why you don't see any exports coming out of China in silver. These countries have been stockpiling it. This is why they're draining the exchanges in a methodical fashion. They're doing it slow enough with enough volatility to keep people off the trail, so to speak. You mentioned, and I'll get to your question, but you mentioned a 240 million ounce shortfall. That's 100 million ounces less than all of the mining companies mined last year. In other words, if you mine 1 billion ounces, only 350 million come from the primary miners. The other 650 come from, as you mentioned, byproduct mining. So the majority of what is being mined by the primary silver miners is disappearing. How can they do it? I don't know, other than to say that I think they've been preparing for this for a lot longer than people think. And, while we ignore and shed the price of, or ignore and shed the opportunity to accumulate gold and silver, the West does, these countries have been doing it for a very long time and probably aren't very honest in the numbers in which they give. So maybe that's why you're seeing the countries go to such lengths to accumulate these commodities for whatever is coming next. I mean, why did Turkey buy more gold than anyone in the world the entire year 2022, and then here again in January and February? They're loading up on it. So it could be gold, could be silver, could be whatever that is needed for this new project. But all I can tell you is it is a problem. It is a metal that is massively needed and is depleting in nature, and it has that duality in demand. There's 500 ounces in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile, almost to the ounce. And so, yes, it should be a strategic metal. It should be. And when you think about that word, it should be, or that phrase, it should be a strategic metal. Every time I think of you, I come back to that statement, because you are the one who is, you and I have talked a lot about the fact that the U.S. Mint has just, something's going on there, and they're only producing 14 or 15 million ounces when they've proven to us they can make almost 4 times that much. Do they realize it's a strategic metal? Is that why they're making it so hard to accumulate silver eagles? I don't know. But, suffice it to say, the Belt Road marches on, and I don't think we'll ever know how much they've stockpiled. But your point is valid. This is an element that a branch of the government, I forgot the exact name, the Geologic Survey, Commission, said silver will be the first item struck from the periodic table of elements. Could it happen? Sure. Why not? I mean, it's a depleted asset. It's found in nature in a form called epithermal, right near the surface. Big deposits are disappearing. That's why there's only 35% of the silver that is mined comes from these primary miners, and why the majority comes from companies who just stumble upon it, who are mining other elements. But it's a good question. It's a fair question. But if I had to answer one, it would be that they've thought this through, and they've been accumulating it for years before the West even thought about it, and have more than any of us would be led to believe.
Yeah, and another thing that I've been talking about for a long time now is solar panels and cars. The projections for the amount of solar panels to take up, a certain amount of the electricity production in the world, the projections show by 2050, 100% of the silver that's mined will be used in just solar panels. That means nothing for the Belt and Road, nothing for electric cars, nothing for nothing for anything else. And you can go down the list. Cars, every single car is like that too, not just the EV cars. Every car is using more and more silver because there are more and more electronic components in that car. We don't have the silver. And what they, in the first page, the introduction of the survey, they talk about, well, obviously, as production increases, investors will have to divest of their silver. I'm like, what are you talking about? That is exactly the opposite. The price should go up so they can't buy as much. But it is such a bizarre periodical that they put out. And it's just in the introduction. I'm like shocked.
I have an answer for you too. Peru, one of the biggest producers of silver in the world, is on the Belt Road Initiative, interestingly enough. And who just joined BRICS? Oh, yeah, the other big silver player. That'd be Mexico. So these guys are figuring this stuff out, and they know that what they are attempting to do must be transparent and must be backed by commodities. So they're putting they're forming their alliance. If you have Peru on the Belt Road and Mexico joining BRICS, and on top of Brazil and other South American countries, I think this is where you'll find the majority of the silver. And so maybe that's why they're making these relationships now.
Awesome discussion. Thank you for sharing all that information. It was great stuff, and absolutely, it's coming true now. You've been vindicated, and you'll continue to be vindicated. And if people are behind in getting their physical silver into their own possession, what do you got? What are you looking at as far as premiums? I know Silver Eagles have almost hit the all-time price for gold. They're getting up there close 45, $50 is not far away. Do you have anything reasonable in inventory that you can?
I have Silver Eagles, but I think they're stupid priced. I mean, it's crazy. I have in stock Britannias, Kangaroos, Philharmonics, Kangaroos. Did I say Britannias, Kangaroos, Philharmonics, Krugerrands next week. We have some bars in stock. Junk silver, has jumped up to most companies out there selling it at $15, $16 an ounce over spot. Most companies are selling Silver Eagles at 16 and 17 over. And while we'll beat those prices, I don't find them to be a good value. The value in sovereign coins would be in those that I just mentioned, and the Maple Leafs, which are a little higher, but those others will be right around $5 over. The Maple Leaf around six and a half over. Bars are going to be more affordable. There is still silver, but Biggs, we've added north of 12,000 clients in 30 days. Since Silicon Valley Bank failed, I've never experienced anything quite like it, ever. And this market will define itself by the inability to source product. And nothing makes me feel more than that. Two things. One, when the shit hits the fan, people are going to realize there's nowhere to go but gold and silver. And silver being so massively undervalued, so compelling in all of its, use cases and in supply and all of this stuff we just talked about. But you also have all of these states that are waking up. Arkansas just passed a law just yesterday, the day before, to not only allow gold and silver in the state treasury, but to allow it for all purchases made for public and private, following suit of Texas, Wyoming, Missouri, Alaska, Idaho. These states are waking up, and so are their constituents. You throw into the mix that amount of attention for the first time given by state governments, along with the instability in the banks, and you have for the first time, I think, the recipe for the public to wake up. And if it's this hard to get product now and see premiums rising the way they are, when it's still just this little microcosm of people you and I have been talking to forever, wait until everyone realizes, my God, what are we doing? What are we going to do when another couple of banks fail or whatever it may be, which is coming, I do believe. Mm-hmm. I think you're looking at an opportunity of a generation. And I truly, truly mean that. And what you're seeing in Silver Eagles and junk silver with these huge premiums, I think is emblematic of what you will see across the entire gold and silver spectrum. So God bless you for having the courage to do what you've done for so long. And you too, I think we'll find great vindication. And, the problem that you and I have is that we've been very early because we look at things logically with mathematics and economics, and they've been able to manipulate it well. No, we're not talking conspiracy, but the bottom line is that mathematics always wins in the end. It just matters what triggers it and when it happens. And you can see by the way that the world is positioning themselves in every way that truth is coming. So I love being here with you. You're one of my all-time favorites. I'd do anything for you and your listeners. And anyone who wants info, I know the website is not done yet. It's been the worst experience of my life. It's this close. It's done. It's just the things we're plugging into it. There are still a few states that do tax. We're almost done. In the meantime, send us an email at info@milesfranklin. Say Bix sent me. We'll make sure you get an updated price sheet. We'll answer any questions you have. And we'll go from there. But as always, brother, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Wonderful conversation. And don't wait, people. The longer you wait, the higher the premiums are going to get, the less availability we're going to see. More and more people are waking up to the obvious fact that silver will not be available for the kind of future that the rest of the world wants, or even the U.S. wants. at least not at these prices. So buy today. Don't wait to buy silver and wait. I love that saying. And it's true. Even though we've been here for many, many decades, I wouldn't have changed anything for the world, because I think it's important that people understand what's going on behind the scenes. And Andy Schectman was here to inform and enlighten us on the mainstream, and great stuff. Wonderful information. Thank you, my friend. And
Got it, brother.
we will see you hopefully very soon. If you find some time, get out of the warehouse and come hang out. Thank you, Andy. And we'll talk to you next time.
Look forward to it, Pixie. Stay well, bro.